turn the sound off on your cell phones right now. Good evening, and thank you for coming to tonight's special evening with Tom Hanks and John Horn. I'm Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Block, now in our 27th season. Thank you. I need to thank my wonderful co-host, the NPR affiliate LAist, formerly known as KPCC. LAist is the most listened to public radio station in Southern California, and by extension, one of the most listened to public radio stations in the United States, and by my definition, that makes it the best, because, and the biggest. On behalf of Writer's Block, and all of us here tonight, I want to express my gratitude to the brass at LAist, and of course to their donors and supporters. Now for tonight, Tom Hanks. You already know he's one of the world's favorite performers. That's why you're here. But he's a lot more than that. A producer of wonderful TV documentaries related to space exploration and to American cultural history and more. He's a philanthropist dedicated to veterans and other social causes for good. And now he's a novelist. Tom Hanks' new book, The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece, is about just that. In it, we feel his almost contagious love of post-war American history and the obvious good time he had while writing it. It's funny, it's joyful, it's full of eccentric oddball characters, some with egos larger than this room, and some epic action that is at once poignant and again, really funny. Hollywood is not necessarily an easy place to navigate, even if you are Tom Hanks. John Horn is the host of LAist Studios' podcast called Retake with John Horn. John is an entertainment reporter who thrives on challenging the most prominent voices in the entertainment industry. He explores broad social questions that inevitably confront, oh my God, wait a second, this just, he explores broad social questions that inevitably confront content creators, and each podcast is grounded in his in-depth conversations with writers and actors. So here's what's going to happen tonight. John and Tom will chat. You will have questions. I usually demand in the most severe way that you put your cell phones away, but tonight is different. Just turn your sound off. On the screen, you can see a phone number to which you can text questions. John and Tom will address some, but there's not going to be a lot of time, so they'll take some from the text. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Hanks and John Horn.
How many of you think John Horn is a lot taller in real life than he sounds on the radio?
Here we are.
Hey, John, good to talk to you again. You
Good to see you.
You and I have bumped heads a couple of times, right?
We have.
Yeah, we have in various places, so it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Tell us where we are.
Okay, let's just jump into it. Everybody was like, Tom, tell us with your day job as a movie star, what is it that prompted you to write a novel? The reason is because I don't need to, this is not product placement, making movies is as fascinating as any long-term creative endeavor, and it has the same amount of twists and turns and personalities as, say, building a bridge across the Ohio River, or any sort of like big, massive undertaking that can only be done with a huge amount of people all collaborating on the same project. And oftentimes movies go south because it turns out not everybody is collaborating on the same project. And I wanted to capture that thing that my editor said. He says, nothing's more interesting than hearing people tell about what they do and how they came to do it and why they do it. So that's in there, I hope, is apocryphal stories that are the equal to this. So let me kick this off right now with a motion picture story about the making of not one, but two modern motion picture masterpieces experienced by yours truly. And by the way, when I mention a title of one of my films, you have to jump in with the applause, just like that, okay? I do not want there to be a lag or something like that, because we're not editing this, and it's got to be vox populi. Oh, tell us more about that one, Tom. So it has to be that, okay? I was making a movie with Mike Nichols called Charlie Wilson's War. Thank you. And we had shot in the mountains of Morocco, and we needed some extra footage. So there's a very famous place out. It's called Magic Mesa. It's out on the road to Lancaster and Pear Blossom Highway. And you have to go way up there, and you find it's a big flat place where they used to test, believe it or not, World War II airplanes. But it's a huge flat place, and we turned that into essentially a refugee camp during the war between the Soviet Union and Afghanistan. All sorts of Afghanis came down from communities all over California. And it was also a Red Cross hospital, so we had to have a number of cast people that were, for example, amputees, missing limbs. And there is actually an active casting community of amputee actors that when the call comes out, they are in the background of an awful lot of shots. So we have some time off, and I'm just in a tent off to myself in order to close my eyes and get out of the heat, what have you. And a fellow comes in, some other folks are there, and a fellow comes in and he puts down his bag, and I happen to notice that he has one arm. He is in fact an amputee actor. And I said something like, "Hey man," which I think is very ecumenical of me, don't you think? You know? If I'm using the word ecumenical correct. I said, "Hey man," he said, hey Tom," which fair enough, that's all right. I'm on the call sheet, they know my name. And I say, "How you doing today?" He said, "Doing good. And he said, "Hey, you mind if I mention something to you?" I said, "We're just sitting here, dude." And he says, "This is the second time we've worked together." I said, "Oh really? We've done something before yet?" He said, Yeah. I was in Forrest Gump. And I'm looking at him now, I'm thinking, I remember, yeah, you were. You were the guy in the hospital when I was watching Gomer Pyle on TV, and you said, "Gump, turn that shit off." You had a line. I said, "Yeah, I did." I said, "Wow." And he said, "That was my first job." "Really? Your first job as an actor, you get a line in the movie? That's pretty big." Yeah, I heard, somebody told me about it because of this, and so I got it, and there you go. So that's a big deal. So that was the first time we worked, and I guess this will be the second. Yeah, the second time. I said, "Wow. Well, that's a lot of time." I think El Gumpo was like 1993, and now it's 2000 something, so it's been a long time. So I said, how have you worked a lot? He says, "I've worked just enough. But actually, I've gone to law school, and this now is my last job as an actor because I passed the bar exam and I'm going to be a lawyer." I said, "Dude, this is quite an honor, and ain't that a goofy thing about making movies? You and I have met on the first movie you ever made as an actor, and now the last movie I've ever made." I said, "You have just made my day. That's very special." And I bring this up because the first time we worked together, the Vietnam hospital set was right here at the Wilshire Ebell Theatre, over in the structure with the lounge and whatnot. We did it all up, and that's where Gary Sinise lost his legs, and I ate ice cream and learned how to play ping pong, and a special talent. Cast member had his very first line of the Screen Actors Guild saying, "Gump, turn that shit off," and it was right here. And that is part of the odd serendipity, and yet there's a little bit more to it than just a story about making a movie. It's about a guy's life and his dreams and what happened, and that is just one of the types of things that goes into, ladies and the making of another major motion picture masterpiece.
I thought you were going to say he's now suing you for copyright infringement for stealing a story. before we talk
Well,
about
he is a lawyer, isn't he?
Yeah, I know. You never know.
Might not have anything else to do.
We're going to talk about one other thing quickly before we get into the book, and that is 1947, which I think is, about the start of this book. There's a guy named Jack Warner, brother to Sam, who said this of actors: an actor is a schmuck. And he said of screenwriters, name checking a pretty good brand of a writing tool, a screenwriter is a schmuck with an Underwood. So I guess in Jack Warner's eyes, you would be a double schmuck, or in Hollywood E's, schmuck
I'm
too.
going to tell you what, they may be right, but we certainly made those sons of bitches a ton of money,
Well,
didn't we?
here we go. So those schmucks with
Underwoods, yeah.
those schmucks with Underwoods are now on strike. What's your take on the strike?
There's no doubt that with the future is upon us. When I first came out to do Bosom Buddies, thank you, Bosom Buddies. We made the pilot in March. It was sold in May, I think, and I came out to do an episode of The Love Boat in June. You don't have to applaud The Love Boat, but God bless you, man. That's awfully cool of you. And then the actors went on strike in 1980 on June 30th. We stayed out on strike until mid-October, and then the writers went out again the very next year. And that was because there was this thing coming down the pike. And there may be people that disagree with me in this audience, but I don't care. There was already this thing coming down the pike that they knew of, a new revenue stream, and it was home video. The VHS had been invented, and they know that there was going to be this pipeline of cash that had never been in the business before that was coming down. And so I think my recollection of the history of those strikes is that it was coming, and they wanted to work out what that was going to be. And there was, whatever happened, they said, well, let's find out what it is, let's stall, blah, 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 blah. And there's been some strikes ever since, and it's always been about, I think, this understanding that a new thing was coming down, so let's figure out what that pie is. I think we all now know the economic realities of streaming, and we are at an evolutionary crossroads as far as how that pie, and when I talk about the pie, I'm talking about the new place that society is in which there are so many options for entertainment, that this new concept is brought in, is that we all now have to want to do something very unique that used to be standard in our lives. And the unique thing is we need to leave our house, drive to a place, be there at 7:45, park the car, buy a ticket, get the red vines and the Diet Coke, and then sit in a room with a bunch of strangers to watch a movie. That now is farther down the food chain than it used to be. So, I am a member of every guild there is, and I am on strike, and because this is going to have to be determined, not just for the future of the bread and butter issues that affect us all, but also for the arts and sciences of motion pictures.
Thank you. There's an old...
Now I'm going to tell you, there's folks from CAA that are out there going like this.
There is an old expression about creative writing, which is write what you know, and your book, for some obvious reasons, fits in that mold. But you can also change that maxim and say, write whom you know. And I have to assume that you have worked alongside some very impressive, self-made, and talented women throughout your career, because this book could have been called, and it's not a catchy title, Women Who Solve Problems. There's Candace, or Dace, there's Al, there's Ren, there's Nev, principally, and the one person who doesn't do his job is a guy, and he's an actor. So I want to ask you about women who solve problems and why that is such an important theme in this story.
Well, I will tell you that the women that I have now, and look, I don't know if I've worked with maybe more women directors than most, but the ones who, essentially altered and saved my career twice was Penny Marshall. The women filmmakers, the women writers, the women executives, certainly the actors as well, did not come by their place in the cultural zeitgeist or the business very easily. They had to claw, to a degree, tooth and nail, because they were women. Women, the other directors that I've worked with as a producer, them too. I don't know if it's based on gender or puffery, but I would say this: when it came down to the moment where problems have to be solved, the women that I've worked with are the toughest and the most thorough, because they put it in, which means my power of charms were worthless in trying to get it in, because they put it in this kind of way. It's a problem. A lot of guys I work with say, hey, look, it didn't work out. It didn't work out. It didn't work out. So I'm sorry, it didn't work out. Women come and say, it's a problem. And we cannot have a problem. There is one of the things that I have since learned, that a lot of movies start, and any kind of project, start shooting on a Wednesday. Why do you think it starts shooting on a Wednesday? Because by Friday, you know who the problem is. And that person is not there on Monday. If someone who will solve the problem is there, and if anybody, I'm gonna just assume no one here is a non-combatant because it's Los Angeles, meaning there's no civilians in the room, okay? We know the hard-assed aspects of what we do for a living, or even if we just want to do for a living. Some version of all of us has done something like moved to Los Angeles, slept in a car for as long as it took in order to do what we want to do for a living. And we know that it's hard work. We're lucky if we get it. You got to make it stick. And there's a number of things that you can do that can prove the best thing that we could have in our pocket. And that is, we are known for causing no problems. Even if you're an actor, you could be known for causing no problems. Even if you are a son of a bitch and do nothing but cause problems, for a while, they'll give you, that option. Matter of fact, I hope that any director that calls another director to ask about me, so Hanks, true, false, what's the deal? Oh, Tom solves problems for you. How do you do that as an actor? You show up on time. No, sorry, you show up early. You get there early. You know exactly what you're going to be shooting, and you're familiar with the text, not just your own lines, but the entire movie that you're making. And you have an idea in your pocket that you don't waste anybody's time telling them about. I think the actor's job is to provide the motivation for whatever is necessary for us in the scene. And that means go over there and look out the window. Okay. I know exactly why are you working out? Oh, I got 19 reasons why I'm looking out the window. I just bought a new car. I'm worried about the paint job. There's a lot of seagulls around. They're going to take a shit on the car. I'm wondering and then you come back to Tom, what were you so busy with over at the window, man? You're just in the background. Oh, I got a whole thing going on here, boss. Don't worry. I'm okay. So you end up solving a problem for somebody, and every place in the creative dialectic of making a movie is somebody who can either solve a problem or cause one. And if you cause more problems than you solve, you are buttered toast. Bye-bye. Go away. You're in the way. You're making it too hard for us to do something that is nearly friggin' impossible in the first place. And that is make the day and have it be good and make sure it's cuttable. That's one of the basic aspects of it that then has to be matched. How many actors do we have in the room? All right. Okay, so you all know you have to do all that other stuff, right? You got to do the time thing and be there, and you got to not solve problems, but then emotionally, you have to go to this place that would make other people stark raving nuts, and you got to do it every time, every scene, everything, and you can't fake it. You have to actually go there crazy ass deep. And why Well, like for example, there's a nightmare of a cast member.
We'll get to that.
Okay, all right. So
Don't spoil it
solve
yet.
problems, John Horn. Solve problems. Solve more than you cause, and you might be okay.
The characters in this novel, almost to a person, are not cynical. They actually love not just making movies, but the idea of making movies. I'm wondering, has that been as much your experience as it is a reaction to the way that stories about movie making are typically told with cynicism?
Well, yes, because I find that this is a very hard-edged, tough, brutal business, particularly if you live in Los Angeles. But cynicism cannot rue the day. It cannot come from a cynical perspective. Not that we look. Here, I'm gonna make a confession that we all have to keep to ourselves, okay? Because if this gets out, it might seem as though we are really quite cynical, and we're not. All right? Maybe we're not cynical maybe we're optimistic until the third or fourth time. Put the fucking phones down. I do not want this. I'm joking. I don't. There's no such thing as privacy in this world anyway, so what are you going to do? All right, I will tell you this deep, dark secret that you will, quiet, keep it to yourself, quiet, okay. When, say, the award season comes around, okay, the first thing you do is vote for yourself. Okay. The second thing you do is vote for your friends, right? Your friends, your loved ones, your friends, you want to vote. The third thing you do is vote against your enemies. Meaning that you don't vote for them, you vote for anybody else but them. You literally go through and pick somebody from a movie or name you recognize, you put them in because you do not want that enemy nemesis of yours to get in. You do not want that. And the last thing you do is really vote your conscience and who did a really great job. That's the point. Now that sounds very cynical, but it's kind of like, you know, that's why it's like high school with money. So that's kind of like what you did. But I do. But when you are actually making the movie, or there's the possibility that you're making a movie, cynicism and to a degree ego has to be checked at the door because it cannot be a cynical process. Otherwise, you cannot do the best work that is expected of you, and that goes if you've got the biggest lines on the day in the sides, or if you're the generator operator that has to make sure that the power grid stays up.
I want you to read this paragraph that starts Alicia, because I think this is an example of what I was talking about.
Alicia Founders?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you need to set it up, I think this is a table read, right? And this is Alicia's first job?
Okay, yes. This is Alicia.
Alicia.
Alicia has started off because she was the night clerk at the hotel where the folks are staying, and she heard somebody mention that they really wish they had frozen yogurt. And without telling anybody what she was doing, she went off and ordered frozen yogurt and had it delivered up to the person's room. The person turns out to be the director of the film, who then tells his assistant that somebody in this hotel made sure I got frozen yogurt, and I didn't even say much of anything. And so that person goes to this lady, Alicia, and says, "You just solved a problem for me." And she ends up being hired because, as a local hire, who knows where it's going to go, because she solves problems in the production office. Alicia found herself swept up in the moment, breathless. Something new to her experience was about to happen, and she was in the room as both a witness and participant. She was going to help make a motion picture. Her body felt a tingle. She lost a bit of her physiological balance, her spiritual equilibrium, sensing a part of herself rising up, and out of her body. A spectral version of herself was suspended in the room there in the PO on 10 Penn Alley. She saw herself, she saw everyone sitting below her around the square of tables under fluorescent lights as Bill Johnson read his own stage directions. as the actors read their lines with varying degrees of certainty and commitment. When the lingering spirit of Alicia heard Bill Johnson say, "Fade to black, roll in credits," the corporeal Alicia MacTeer found her eyes misted, her hands applauding. She felt safe. Reading from the book of...
I'm wondering if there were certain characters that you found easier to write or harder to write, and did those have anything to do with characters that you saw yourself in, or the opposite, that you knew that this was so far away from you, it was actually easier to accomplish?
I'm going to ask the internet to please have a sense of humor about itself, okay, for a minute, because the internet does not register, say, like sarcasm or some degree of humility or self-deprecation. But at some point I said something like, I don't know how many movies I've made, I don't know, 60, and 4 of them are pretty good, you know. What 4 are they? What movies do you hate? How could you say that, you know? It's like, cut me some slack, man. I'm a smart ass who got lucky, so go easy. More or less, I will say everything, euphemistically, everything in this book I have either witnessed or heard of or caused myself in the course of making the movie. The stories are all based on stories that I heard. The experience are all based on movie making experience that I have had. And none of them necessarily are about what helped the movie get made, but they are all about what goes on in the course of making the movie, which is the point of the book. I don't think anybody knows how a movie is made. Everybody assumes they know how a movie is made, any more than they know, you know, they assume what the life of George and Cohan is because they saw Yankee Doodle Dandy. Well, it's really different, you know, in real life, so.
In fact, the beginning of the novel says the following is based on a true story. Characters and events have been altered for dramatic purposes. There's a lead actor in the novel who, tell me if this is fair, has his head up his ass. So I want to set up a scene in the book.
Autobiographical.
So the director, Bill, is talking to Edward Norton. I'm sorry.
True, not true?
No, I'm sorry. He's talking with Val Kilmer. I'm sorry. So,
Cheap shot, Joe.
Christian Bale, no, I'm sorry. Truth is, the character's name is OK Bailey. And I'm gonna have you read one more scene. This is about Bill meeting with, if they're in your,
Oh, sorry, thank you.
you can start with, it would be helpful to Onward. OK Bailey is the star of this film.
Hold on, where it would be helpful, where?
It would be helpful.
Oh, all right. Okay, this is a conversation on the set, on the first day of shooting, being the director and
Tom Hardy.
And the top, above the line, you know, above the line, number 2 on the call sheet, title character. It would be helpful if, say, in the early takes we approach Firefall with the adage less is more being our goal. Well, in some movies I found that less is less, as in not enough. Al's cranium echoed with the silent snort of derision at this. The kid has made 2 movies. 2. Bill said, we could do with less optional takes and save that time. OKB said, yeah, but having enough takes time. I can't be hurried to do my job, guys. I do not want to hurry your process, Bill calmly explained, but I don't want to waste your time or your efforts. So let's nail it. Then we can rejig and play around some. I need to be loose, see? The actor said. To let the character flow out of me unfiltered without a lot of rules laid down on me, you know, like we did today. Where we're already half a day behind. Oh, let me change this. This is in the trailer after the first day of shooting. This is the meeting that occurs on a Wednesday when the director and the producer comes in and said, hey, can we have a word about tomorrow? So it's in his trailer, his Schlegelmilch, if you will. Where we're already half a day behind, Al said. You're talking schedule, sweetie. OKB just called Al McTeer sweetie. Not my concern. My gig here is to walk and talk and strut and scare his firefighter army man every morning I'm in the lens. That is what OKB does for you. Schedule his production stooges with radios in their ears. Well, let's do this, Bill offered. Tomorrow, you and I talk some before, so we're on the same page, so we can both, feel good about what we get. Oh, you mean like in here before I go into the torture chamber? He meant the works. When you are comfortable and ready to jump in, say on the set for 15 minutes, then we get a few takes, then we can play around. I think it would be better if we just do half a dozen takes, see what's in the box, and then talk some. That was what Bill said. Just that. It's how I work best. Truth is time independent, man. There's nothing wrong with going deep and long to capture the truth. N'est-ce pas? And I gotta confess to you, I feel great about where we ended up with Firefly by the end of the day. The character's name is Firefall, by the way. I'm glad, Bill said, moving to the trailer door, onward. Now,
truth is not time dependent. That truth is not time dependent. That feels like an overheard conversation.
Now, I'm going to tell you, I have been the actor in that conversation more than once, trying to convince somebody to let me do something that I really wanted to do, and said, look, this is how I work, man. This is what you get. And sometimes that comes about because we actually are not making the same movie, which is that happens, All these reasons to work together come around, but turns out you're not really making the same movie. I've made 4 of those. Never mind which one. But the other part of it, I've also been the director saying, dude, look, we have to make a day, and so there's a thing. Look, I'm just going to go off and do your thing. But the other thing that comes out of it is as you learn over time, there is a certain responsibility the actor has. Now, what I would like to think that I've learned at is I just say, let me show you. And then after that, it's like, how can I help? What do you need, boss? Penny Marshall said something great. I was really full of myself the first time I worked with Penny, because I was a hot shot, man. And I'd made, hey man, I made Turner and Hooch, man. I'm a I think I made it afterwards, but it doesn't matter. It's all lost in a 66-year-old fog, as it is. But she was, we were doing we just did it so many times. And I said, my God, Penny, what do you want? 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 How many more times are we going to do this? What do you want? And she said, I don't know what I want. But I'm gonna be in a dark room in 8 months, and I'm gonna have this here, and I'm gonna say, can't we get something there? We can't because we didn't shoot it. So I gotta get there, and I gotta get there, and I gotta get here, and I gotta come back there. Because if I don't have it, it's not in the movie. And that was actually a very liberating moment, because I said, oh my God, this person, it's not an auteur theory. You literally are saying, help me find something new. Let's test this material and get it. And what your job is, Tom, is to do it as many fucking times as I ask you to do it. Because who's the boss here? She is. She's the boss. So an important lesson. And I'm going to say that was like, I don't know, that was like my 9th movie or something like that. And that's a great lesson to get from somebody, because she wasn't yelling at me. She was explaining to me the collective creative process in which she needed me to be her ally. And I was not her adversary. And there are sometimes you work with somebody who treats you like an adversary, and guess what? It does become an adversarial relationship after a while.
But that's also a big part of the novel, in that on any given day, an actor has to know his, her, or their lines. They have to do a performance.
It's the basic minimum,
Show up on time. But there are also...
You'd be amazed, though, how often it's like, what are we doing? What is it? What are the lines? Am I here? Blah, 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 right? You know, okay, yeah, I know. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. My line, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. What is my line again? What is it? What is it? Pardon me? What? What is it? What is it? What? Okay, can we do it again? You cannot mean that. Is it you cannot mean that? Is that what the line is? You cannot mean that? You can mean that? You don't mean that. You don't mean that. Are we rolling? Keep rolling. Just keep rolling. Keep rolling. Keep rolling. You don't mean that. 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 You don't. You have room for scissors, right? You can get in there and pick the one you want, right? You don't mean that. You don't mean that. You don't mean that. You don't mean that. You do not mean that. That's how some people shoot scenes with their lines, you don't mean that. You're actors, am I wrong?
Yeah.
No, no.
So, even though that doesn't quite happen in this story, there are a lot of people who are making that moment happen. From the Teamsters, who get a very nice shout out, to hair and makeup, to the PA who's getting everyone's coffee ordered just right. So telling those people's story feels very important in telling this story in this novel.
Let me tell you this one thing that I wish I could remember the exact movie, but again, 66-year-old lost in the fog. The base camp, by the way, the base camp for Forrest Gump was right over here in the parking lot. Base camp is a million trucks, all the RVs, hair and makeup, everybody is over, the prop truck, the lighting truck, the gaffers, everything, the greens person, craft service, it's all over there. And on some gig, I needed something, I needed a better pin or I needed some better prop. So I went into the prop truck. And the prop truck is essentially a bunch of closets and drawers and everything is perfectly laid out. And you could go into the prop truck and ask for anything, and there's a guy in there who knows exactly where it is, you know. What do you need? You need a fountain pen for the 1940s? You need a pair of baby shoes? You need a can of hairspray? Here, right? Boom, 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 and you've got it. So I go into one, and I'm going to say the guy's name was Cubby. And oftentimes, you know, one of the things about making movies is the guys who've been doing it for a long time, their bodies begin to break down because in the more physical aspects of the job, our brothers in IATSE, you know, their backs go out, their hips go back, and you can't necessarily be a gaffer and, you know, and live for a long time. And prop guys are on their feet, and it's an awful lot of work that has to be done by. So sometimes the person on the truck is the senior citizen. Might have a knee brace, might be getting a new hip replaced pretty soon, but is oftentimes a seasoned veteran. And so one time, and he or she, many women, sit on a stool right next to the cappuccino maker, and they just sit there all day long. And you go in there and, what do you need, Tom? Hey, Tommy, hey, Tommy, what do you need? What do you need? So, well, I'm looking for some baby shoes and a fountain pen from the 1940s. And, oh, yeah, here you go. Hey, want a cup of coffee? So I had a quick cup of coffee, but hey, Cubby, what's the deal here? How long have you been doing this? Oh, God, Tom, I've been doing this a long time, you know. Yeah, I mean, when Brian called me, he needed a guy here on the truck. And I want to keep the pension and welfare up, and I need the health plan, so I'll come back in and do it. You know, I gave up working really hard props. I was on Matlock for 9.5 years. Andy Griffith is a great guy. He is just a great, he reminds me of you, Tom. He's a really, really great guy. But I did that for a while, and then I was on the 5-0 for a bit, Hawaii 5-0, the new one, you know, not that. So I was doing that for a while. Then, oh God, you know, I went down to Argentina on Taurus Bulba. I did that. So I've been doing that. But now since Brian needed a guy, and so, you know, I've been coming in here, and I'm just doing this. It's a good show. It's a good show. You're making a good show here. I like the show that you're doing. I think it's a good show. And Brian needed some hands, so I decided to come in and do it. So I said, well, I mean, how did you get started? What was your first job? Oh, my first job, oh gosh, well, let's see. I had just got back from Vietnam. And after that, what are you going to talk about? You know, his years on Matlock? No. So, well, excuse me. How old when you got back from Vietnam? Oh, I was 24. What year was that? Oh, God, that was 72. Well, shit. You know, I want to hear more about that guy's story. And that type of experience it's the breadth of making any movie. And it's not just the crew who are the blue collar aspects of it. It's also, let me tell you a story about, I made a movie with Charles Durning. Charles Durning. Remember the character actor Charles Durning? He's a great actor. I saw him as Big Daddy on Broadway, and I made him. Okay, you don't have to plot for this one, okay? All right. I made a movie called The Man with One Red Shoe. It was my third movie. Shot it.
Not one of the four.
Shot it at Fox. It was like a big dream come true. It was great, and Charles Durning was in it. Charles Durning, great character actor. This was, I think we made it it would have been 1982, maybe, 82, 83. And Charles Durning was a World War II veteran who made he was in the second wave on Utah Beach. And he has written about having killed enemy soldiers with his bare hands on Utah Beach. And we're making The Man with One Red Shoe now. So that's an extreme version. Let me tell you, this one might be a little bit better. Okay, I'll go a little easier on it because they're like, oh Jesus, Vietnam, Normandy, Tom, cut us some slack here. No wonder your production slate is what it is. We were making, believe it or not, Sleepless in Seattle. By the way, I'm telling you, these are light stories you'll read in the book, so it's not just, Tom's, skate through his enchanted career. Doesn't have to be that. But somebody had been playing Tetris. Remember when Tetris first came out? And it had that do 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 do. And a lady was making me up. Can't remember what her name was, but she was making me up, and I started humming the theme song to Tetris. She says, Tetris. I played Tetris 18 straight months, 12 hours a day in order to get me through my divorce. Now, what conversation do you want to have after that? Tell me how you did that. Oh my God, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I thought I was going to lose my kids, and that son of a bitch was taking me for everything. It's like that's... So you end up having these moments with people that are so removed from the cuckoo nutty job that we do, that expands it just expands your connection to something bigger than yourself.
And that's really reflected in the book, because one of the things that filmmakers are constantly told is cut the exposition or the backstory, get to the action.
I'm in favor of it. Cut the backstory. Lose the boilerplate. Blah, 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 blah. Although TV can't exist without it, because at the end, after every act break on a cop show, somebody walks into the set like this. Well, it turns out Ramirez was in the Marine Corps. He was stationed down in Guantanamo, and in fact knows how to sail his own boat and jump out of airplanes. So I think we got ourselves a major suspect. Now that requires a type of exposition that you're going to have to.
But in terms of backstory, you rarely get to explore so much about your characters' lives before they become part of the story, which is what you do in this book. You get to have exposition, you get to have backstory. Before these characters are characters in the story that you're telling, you get to go back, which is so contrary to how you would typically write a screenplay or the kind of notes you would get from the studio executives. Like, we don't need to know that, but it's very important that we as readers know that about these characters.
Well, yeah, because everything is impacted by in ways that you just know it ends up carrying gravitas. Now, if you want to read a really sloppy screenplay, thank you. You can read the screenplay that I had to write. Somebody knows how to do it. You take a picture of a QR code and you can read it, or it's on the e-thing. Because I had to write what they were shooting in order to go along with it. And the name of the movie that they're making is a sort of a one-off superhero movie called Nightshade, the Lathe of Firefall.
And what is a lathe?
A lathe is a machine that you use in order to shape wood. By the way, good joke, because he's making a reference because some of the executives wanted to change the name of the movie because they don't know what a lathe is. So, all right, you know. Okay, I get a bunch of cheap shots in the book like that. So the character, Eve Nightshade is a young woman who is tortured by her superpowers and doesn't want to be a superhero and is only trying to protect her grandfather, who is a Marine Corps veteran. And Firefall is the specter of a Marine who is a flamethrower that is coming for him. That's essentially the movie in a nutshell. So the character, then, the main character is a flamethrower. And you have to, just by way of example, if you're starting a movie from scratch, Castaway, thank you. Castaway germinated from an idea that I had when I read an article about FedEx that said jumbo jets filled with nothing but packages and letters flew across the Pacific Ocean twice a day. And I thought, well, what happens if one of those goes down? And that was the germination, the beginning of the story in Castaway. Well, I had read many years ago that outlaw motorcycle gangs in Southern California, the Hells Angels and what have you, the origins for them was from Marine veterans that came back from fighting in the war in the Pacific that had done such heinous deeds and witnessed such terror and horror that they themselves did and they themselves witnessed, that there was no way they were going to take their combat pay and go back to wherever they were and become accountants. So they bought war surplus motorcycles and became the Hells Angels. And a character, one of them, is the uncle of one of the key players in the development of the source material. The book is broken up into these sections. Source material, right? What is it? Can I read what it says? Here's the chapter.
Can you read the book?
I can't read it. Yeah. What a thick, fabulous book. Holy cow. $32.50. Is that a bargain or is that? I don't know. Can you read them out? I don't even. Oh, here they are. Sorry, I got to get my glasses out. Where are my glasses? Here they are. Backstory, right? Okay. Backstory, which is kind of like the beginning of how, what went into who came together and made this movie. Source material, which is all the stuff that you collect in order to learn about the era, the time, the design, the characters, whatnot. Development hell, we all know what that is, don't we? Don't we, seasoned veterans? Like a good idea for a movie that just never quite gets going and everybody's trying to make it work and maybe it doesn't, but then you go into prep, which can go on, however long that takes and is often, its own version of nightmare. Casting, and then the shoot, and then post, all very specific tributaries in the making of the movie. But the guy who is responsible for the source material is 7 years old when he meets his uncle, who is a veteran from the Pacific War, who was a flamethrower, who comes back into his life when he's much older, and he's an artist, and he draws comic books. And so Bill Johnson, the director, he's trying to make a boy meets girl love story in the confines of, people with superpowers, because that's the only fucking movie that gets made these days. Pardon my salty language.
We should know too that this veteran has what was called shell shock. Then he clearly has incredibly difficult PTSD, which is part of his story and part of how this story comes about. Very early in the book, and I'll try not to take personal offense here, Bill, the director of the movie in the novel, says, quoting him now, or quoting you, journalists, the lazy ones anyway, always try to explain how movies are made as though there's a secret formula we patented, or procedures that are listed like a flight plan to the moon and back. Those people look at the Northern Lights as having been designed. If they saw how we movie orphans do our job, they'd be bored, silly, and very disappointed, unquote. So, is your novel in a way a corrective to that way of thinking about how movies are made?
Yes, it is. How do you explain the intangible? How do you explain one damn thing after another? You can't. Particularly if you're starting with the end result. I mean, I will take cheap shots at journalists because I've spoken to many of them in the course of my career. And there is a kind of like supposition. So this is like, so you must have had a great time making this movie. Tell me about your new movie, Tom. Wow, that must have been really, really crazy. What's it like? What's it like? You know, Stephen is such a genius. You know, how do you get along with Stephen? Any funny stories? You know the scene where you do that thing and you cry? How'd you do that scene exactly? What went into it? How did you get to the point where you cried and wept and shook your fist at the sky? What was going through your head when you did that? What's the secret of being married for 35 years, you know? That's the nature of the discourse oftentimes that goes into because we've seen movies and stuff like that explain the making. We think we all know that it's planned somehow. And I could walk you through movies that you yourself know and that I love, and I've since done enough, hearing about it. There's this great, can I tell the Casablanca story?
Sure.
They're all everybody on a movie loves nothing better than to get together and talk about movies all night long, the ones we love. There's this famous story about Casablanca, all right? And this is how movies are made. I'm actually telling you something you already know, but this is just an example of it because it's never changed. Movies are still made this exact way. Humphrey Bogart loved to be at Ciro's with a cocktail in his hand at 6 o'clock every single night, right? He's working at Warner Brothers on a movie called Casablanca. There's 9 different writers. Michael Curtiz is the director. He's got a funny Hungarian voice. And he needs to shoot something. Got to shoot something because the lights are up. Bogey's in his white tuxedo. They're in Rick's. They're part of a big long thing. Everybody's dressed up. All the dressed actors are in it. And this is a story, is that not knowing what else to shoot, but knowing maybe what was going to be coming down the pike, Michael Curtiz says to Bogey, Bogey, why don't you just come? On action, you come, you hit the mark, you look off, you give a nod, okay? And then we yell cut, and then you can go to Ciro's and have dinner, with everybody, with Jimmy Stewart, Van Heflin, or whatever it is. Let me get this straight. You want me to, okay, and action, boom, hit the mark, nod. What was Bogey nodding at? A cat, the DP, the roach coach. No one knows. He just come up, and he's an incredibly great, gifted actor. Knows exactly it's going to end with gravitas. No connection to what he was actually nodding at. Sam, the piano player, the Russian bartender, no idea. But then when you see the movie, he's nodding at Victor Laszlo, what's his name? Anyway, who stands with the Nazis are singing like their Hitler Youth song, and Victor goes up to the band and says, "Play the Marseillaise." And they we don't want to get in trouble there. Play the Marseillaise. And the band leader looks over his shoulder to Humphrey Bogart, who has walked up, hit a mark, and given a nod off screen. So it's one of the most important bone-chilling movies in the history of all cinema, and it was shot because they had nothing else to shoot that day. That is making movies.
That's a happy accident. I have one last question, and then we have some audience questions. There are footnotes in nonfiction books. It could be a Civil War biography, and a footnote says, General Polk then fought later against him at the Battle of Tennessee.
Yeah.
There could be footnotes like David Foster Wallace's that are novels unto themselves. And there are footnotes in this book, which I will describe to you. You're reading the book, and you go, I wonder, and Tom Hanks taps you on the shoulder and goes, I think this is what that means. So could you tell me a little bit about the footnotes and how they came to be? And the water.
Solve the problem.
Solve the problem.
Solving problems.
I like that.
He's like,
And like a good screenwriter, I stole that from somebody who said it in the audience. Okay, yes.
You know what an actor might say at this moment? Oh, thank you, that's great. Well, can you open the goddamn thing for me, for crying out loud? Oh, great, hold on, everybody, keep rolling. No, we'll get it, 1 second, just keep rolling, I'll get it. You can't mean that!
Is it the right temperature?
As you might be able to tell,
Footnote.
I kind of speak in asterisks, They're just kind of like you want to explain something a little bit meta, but then there's kind of like a tangent that you can go off to. And quite selfishly, if I had written it in regular prose, it would have added so many pages onto it that it would have caused a problem with Penguin. So I use a smaller font and asterisks in order to get into the little smaller details that I just think are all just so fascinating that you'll love every one of them.
And show of hands, how many people know that why red vines are West Coast and Twizzlers are East? Not many. What is the red
Let's hear.
vine?
Okay. First of all, and ready. If you're East Coast and you grew up loving Twizzlers, applause, please.
Yeah.
West Coast red vines. I don't disagree. But it's a major deal, man.
It is a major deal. Here's some audience questions. You didn't mention Bonfire of the... No, I made that one up. Do you find... This is a true question. Do you find you're more productive as a writer when you stick to a schedule or when you give spontaneous inspiration your full attention?
That's literally like about writing. Look,
process of writing. When you're productive, and I guess maybe in particular how this book was written.
Well, it's all just such heavy lifting, ain't it? How many writers are in the room tonight? You know, right? There's only one thing you can do. You sit there and do it. You pray that spontaneousness is going to land upon you because you're kind of like in a groove. I will tell you this. I read this thing about the Pomodoro timing technique. This is literally a tool that writers use. I mean, if you set a timer for 25 minutes, like a kitchen timer that might be shaped like a tomato, just the Pomodoro, right? And you set it for 25 minutes. You concentrate, you write during that 25 minutes, and as soon as the thing goes ding, you get up right where you left off and do anything else for 5 minutes. Anything. Then you come back and do another 25. It's amazing how often you come back and not only pick up right where you left off, but have an idea for what's going to come next. No substitute except sitting down and either doing it or waiting for it to happen.
And was that the case in this book? Were you sitting down doing it, or was it between jobs? What was the process?
Oh, I had long stretches where I did nothing but this, but I also think that if you're, the day job can be so all-encompassing, so there's a physiological part of making a movie because there's air that you breathe, there are places that you go, and you put on other people's clothes. It becomes very, very familiar. But I have found that there is an escape is necessary. You have to do something else. Otherwise, you get bogged down in the minutia, and I find it a possibility just you don't want to become cynical about just having to do it all again. So sometimes you just come home and hopefully there's a good, Stanley Cup hockey game on to watch for an hour and a half. But there's the other times where it's like, the call is, I'm going to be picked up at 7:15. I want to be ready and up anyway, so I'm going to get up at 4:30 and write some before we get to it. And it's not that heavy a day for me anyway.
Speaking of the Stanley Cup, sports question. Could you please, I don't know if it's a question or a plea, could you please buy the Oakland A's to keep them in Oakland?
We've lost the Raiders. The Warriors moved to San Francisco, and now they're going to take the A's out of Oakland. Damn them all to hell.
There's only like 2,000 people showing up at games. It's really sad. But
the greatest fans in all of baseball.
if Ryan Reynolds can do it in soccer, you can do it in the major league. I haven't done that well, guys. Will any notable film industry folks recognize characters they specifically recognize in the book?
No, I don't think so, but I think they will recognize a certain archetype. Very rarely do I use anybody's real name because we all have preconceived notions about who those people are. I'd rather have them be like fresh conceits. I will tell you this: there's This is something, if you're an actor, and some actors do, and Ren Lane, who plays Eve Nightshade, she does this. She's in that position where she's at home and she's going through the grid, the DirecTV grid or whatever it is, and one of her old movies is on. That's always a volatile moment, because you think, do I want to see any? I know the movie hasn't changed since I saw it, so the only thing that's changed about it is my perspective of it. And I don't know what if I want to rewrite the experience of seeing that movie again. Because number one, maybe I was younger and much better looking, or maybe I was out of shape and much fatter than I am now. There's always moments in every movie that you think, man, I wish I had that back again. There's also moments where you say, geez, I don't even remember that. Holy cow, when did that get in the movie? But there's also those moments where you think, I hate this scene so much, and I'm in it, and I'm so bad, and the writing is so horrible, and I wanted to choke the director to death for making me do it this way. And the scene goes on for 17 minutes. I have got to watch this. And you do. And it's oddly enough, when I'm in something like a good scene, we lost Peter Scolari just last October. Peter and I did Bosom Buddies together. And I went back, and thanks, Peter. God bless his eternal soul. Blessed memory. I went back and watched some of them and it's funny, I didn't remember any of my lines, but I remembered all of Peter's. It's like, watch what Peter does here, watch what Peter does here. And the opposite is true, is when it's a scene that you absolutely hate. You remember every one of those goddamn lines that you had to say, but you cannot tear yourself away. And it doesn't make you feel good. It actually makes you think like, I was such a coward and a pussy back then that I did that job. Besides, not wanting to, but paycheck's a paycheck.
Last audience question, then I have one final question. This question is, where's your favorite place to write or get inspired? They might be one in the same, or they might be different.
I got to tell you, any space works. I don't mean to be highfalutin about this, but in fact, the process is the same. Acting in a movie requires almost the same amount of writing as writing a novel does. You have to create this stuff out of whole cloth that only you know, that only you are in control of, and then it blends in on a movie. It blends in with everybody else has brought to it, but then it continues along after that. That begins the moment that you read the script for the first time and realize that on a Thursday in September, you're going to be in Pittsburgh saying very specific lines to somebody very specific. You start writing in your head for that moment then. And the same thing goes into the vast thing. Like, for example, somebody asked about the end of Castaway. You don't have to applaud if I've already mentioned the movie. So. I'm not that sad of a human being. Although we did shoot Forrest Gump, right there. I remember all in the years that we were talking to about doing Castaway. First it was myself, and then Bill Broyles, the writer, came along. And Bill said, "Oh, well, actually, the drama of finding the four elements of life could be really quite dramatic. I mean, Chuck will have to find food, water, shelter, and he'll have to make fire. That could be quite dramatic." So he had the second act. And then Bob Zemeckis came in years later and said, "Yeah, well, you know what he really needs? He's got to, he needs, what he needs, he's got to have, company. And out of that, someone to talk to. And out of that came Wilson. So that's a type of writing that goes into that, and it carried with it all that stuff into every day on the thing. But at the end of the movie, we and by the way, we talked about this crazy, because we were always writing up these scenarios that might not be in there or that. And somebody said, the ending of a movie is a very particular thing that you have to land on, which is what I hope I touched on in this book, very specific ending. That has to be one thing, and you don't necessarily know what it is before you're going into it. Hopefully you get lucky. And somebody said, was there ever any other ending for Castaway? And I said, well, in my head, I wrote one, and it was great. In my head. And he said, well, what was it? Well, if you know the movie, Bob said, yeah, we're going to end the movie right at the crossroads, man. The points of the compass, man, right in the middle of nowhere, man. Then she's going to take off, and you see those angels' wings. Oh, man, who knows what's going to happen with that? But, are we going to see it? Are we going to see it? Are we going to see what happened? No. And that's what we did. But in the movie, I thought, in my head, I said, well, then you cut to 7 years later, and the artist lady is welding some statue in the barn, and I'm standing under a tree playing with a 5-year-old kid with an 18-month-old toddler in a blanket on the grass. That was in the movie that I saw. Now, it doesn't matter that that's not there, because it actually is there, in my head, and for anybody else that might ponder, what is the time cut after those close credits?
The last question are the last words written in the book, and these are the acknowledgments. These pages would not exist were it not for Nora. I think we know that's Nora Ephron. We all think of her, we do every single day. So how does Nora live in your work, and how does she live in this book?
Nora was badass. She had come out of the incredibly hard, and not a cynical woman at all, but a very, very hard, she had a cynicism to her, but there was an intent to it because she was a reporter. She was a journalist. So, number one, everything was copied to her. But also, number two, she could eke out a story that was not made up, even though you would not see what that story was. I gave her a ton of trouble at the beginning of Sleepless in Seattle because it was only the second movie that she directed. Okay, she wrote Heartburn, and she worked with Mike, and she worked with Rob. She wrote, she and Delia, her sister, had written When Harry Met Sally.
That's Mike Nichols.
Mike Nichols, sorry, Mike Nichols, yeah. And here she wanted to do this romantic comedy with me and Meg, and I'd worked with Meg already on Joe versus the Volcano, thank you. And it's like, oh, so you want to jump on this gravy train, do you? Based on the studio. And the first time I met her, we were sitting and look, this happens. There's some combination of hubris and a lack of intelligence and a lack of empathy, and just by and large, thoughts that you're a high. I know how. Let me tell you, I know how this works. I know how it works. Yeah. You'll get me, and I'll say this, and Meg will say that. We'll make out, and blah blah blah. It'll be fine. And in the course of doing it, she was tough, and she was dogged. At one point, I complained about her having to have a meeting with somebody because I'm not making a movie with some kid like that. And she called me up and she said, look, do you not understand how this works? The studio says I have to meet with him, so I met with him. Can you handle that, big boy? Or do you have little wet pants that have you, oh no, I'm not working with him. It's what I have to do in order to get the movie made. Well, okay, Nora. So when we started working like that, it ended up, it's that type of thing of, I'm going to be tough on you because I am the boss. Delia and I wrote it, and I want you to do the best work you possibly can, but that doesn't mean just change it. So, no, I became a writer, if I can say that. I became a writer in this instant. We were doing Sleepless in Seattle. She and Nora had written it. And there was a scene in the movie that came about because of this exchange that I had with Nora and Delia. It was a scene in which Ross, my son, didn't want me to go out with somebody because he wanted to meet the lady on the radio, and he was angry, or he was pissed off. And they wrote a scene in which the father said, well, I don't know. I don't know what to do. My son doesn't. I just don't know what to do. And I said, Delia, Nora, are you out of your fucking mind? You think a man who could go off on a date with somebody is going to give a shit that his kid doesn't want him to? And I said, literally, do you know what is going to happen if I go out on a date with this lady little kid? I might get laid. I might get laid. And that led into this whole kind of thing. And she and Delia looked at each other, went like. But the argument that I was making was actually a pretty good one, in that I'm a man. This is men, sons. And so if you want me to do the best work that I possibly can, I have to bring this up, and I could probably bring it up in a less, kid, stupid way, but that's why I brought it up. And when it evolved into something like really 10 times better even than that. And when the movie came out, we were talking about it at one point, and Nora said, well, you wrote that. You wrote that scene. I said, I did not write that scene. He said, no, you wrote that scene. I said, Nora, I complained in rehearsal to you. And I ad-libbed some baloney that you ended up typing into the script. He said, no, we did not see that. You did, and you wrote it. Because, Tom, that's what writing is. And from that moment, that's why Nora is the reason that I'm talking to you right now, John Horn.
Thank you, Tom Hanks. Thank you all. Thanks, Writer's Block.
Great,
Thank you for coming out.
Tom, can you sing?
Chevalier's has books for sale if you want to buy any extras. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
All right, Steve, pretty good, huh?
Hey, that was awesome.
That was awesome.
Hey, send me the recording. Text me the recording.
Absolutely.